Hey, can you hear me? Yeah, URL changed. I just tweeted out the new URL, but such is life. So you can hear me, just to confirm? All right, perfect. Um, Let me share my screen and let's jump into it. I don't need this anymore. I was tinkering and exploring a little bit in the hour and a half I was waiting for my wife's call to finish um, with let me pull up Superlist here with this interaction. So if you recall our list resource, we set up with a avatar attachment. Um, I did an attachment um, just sort of without thinking by default and by habit. But I'm not sure that we actually need an attachment. All that they use is um, an emoji picker. But before getting to wiring it up to the back end, I was thinking about how to implement this. And I had used this package before in another project, and it was pretty smooth and straightforward to use. It is a web component, a custom element, um, which makes it pretty easy to integrate into a Rails application, easy to connect with a stimulus controller as well. Um, but I started playing a little bit with the details and summary, and I had some initial Z index issues. I might not have any of this before. Um, so it spurred me to start exploring um, the popover API. This is something that I have been talking about since the very first stream, and I think that now is a good time to jump into it. So let me start by talking just a little bit about what the popover API is. This is a new HTML feature, which is kind of rare in the last 5 years or so. I'm hoping it becomes less rare, but it is really quite cool and exciting. Let's come down to the examples. So, what it allows you to do is to have a similar kind of disclosure pattern as details and summary, but what you are disclosing behaves more like a dialogue than it does like the child element of a details element. Right? Um, so you can have an invoker, which you connect to some content using the popover target attribute pointing at an ID. And then you declare that the content is a popover using the popover attribute. So purely declarative. You don't have to write JavaScript for this, which is cool. There is a JavaScript API, but it is not required, right? This is one of the things I found a bit frustrating about like dialogues, for example. Um, you, I can't remember now if it was like closing or opening there's some like necessary functionality for a dialog that has no HTML interface. Like you have to write JavaScript to do it, which always just makes me a bit sad. Yeah, show modal, exactly. It's like, how are you not going to expose this through HTML? But maybe browser vendors are starting to learn some of their lessons. Like HTML is awesome. We should have HTML interfaces for these technologies, for these tools. So the popover, let's pull up a code pen just to, oh, this is some specific code pen. I don't want that. Let's just play around in a new pen here. So as you could see here, right, it's a new feature. It's not 100% available, but it is fairly widely available. So it's in Firefox Nightly. It's not yet on Firefox for Android, but this is not like behind a Chrome flag. And what it gives you is this. So detail summary meets dialogue. That's sort of how I would describe it. Now, this is cool. The specific reason that it is cool is that it makes use of this new, relatively new, it's certainly new to me, concept in browsers of the top level. Let's pull up. Top layer. So as I've been talking about in the previous streams, like it is common to have a really brittle UI if you're trying to manage all of these Z indexes, right? And say, okay, this should always be on top of this, that, and that. And the system that you have to have in place to ensure, like, okay, how many layers do you need? Let's say you need like 10 layers. Which elements go into those 10 layers, making sure that they stay there, and then making sure that you get the browser to always put those elements in those layers. If you recall, we had the problem with the tricks editor, the tricks toolbar here, back when we were in the details view, bleeding through one of our menus here. And we could bump the Z index on the menu to infinity. It didn't solve the problem. We had to find their common ancestor, find the two siblings, and set an appropriate Z index on those two siblings, which were, ancestors of the elements that we actually saw the problems with. But it was those elements that we had to say, okay, you will go to like level 10 and you'll go to level 20. So it's quite a pain in the butt. And if you wanted to do it really well, you're going to have to keep like this totally consistent system. And you're going to have to make sure that you are specifying the appropriate Z index on the appropriate elements, which it's not always clear where that's going to be. And so in an interface like this, where there are popovers all over the place, it can get out of hand pretty quickly. So how do popovers help us? Well, they put the content in what is called the top layer, which is like Z index infinity. It's always on top. It will never be covered by anything. And the top layer also has a backdrop available to it. You can show it or not show it. But it effectively just like removes this problem of keeping track of Z index. You can just say, when I show this, show it on top of everything else that's been painted on the screen. And for what we're doing, that is super nice. Now, as I talked about, there is a limitation though. And the limitation is that this top layer element is removed from the document flow of the DOM where it shows up, right? So just to show you what I mean by that, let's put a div in here. And on this div, we will make it position relative. Let's take these two and bring them inside of the div. And on our popover, we will make this position absolute, and we will put it in the top right. Whoops. And typo. Okay, we'll put it in the top right. So if we were using like standard elements, this would show up, up here. Let's see where it shows up now. Right where it showed up before. And just to show you, this isn't going to hide it, but when we remove it, oh yeah, this div, of course, yeah, over here. When we remove all the popover stuff, right, it gets absolutely positioned relative to its relative ancestor. What is happening here is that when we declare this element as a popover, we are pulling it out of the layout of the page. It's put on the top layer, right? So it doesn't know anything about this. It is as if, in some ways, conceptually, it's closest to being position fixed, right? It's relative to the viewport. So you can move it around. You have the power to move it around, but you can only move it around relative to the viewport, which means, so for our case, where we want these popovers to be positioned relative to their triggers, to their invokers, right? It doesn't quite work. So a while back, when I first was reading up on the popover, I put in this Google query: popover, anchor, position. And I found this great blog post. And he talks about like this problem. And he's like, okay, how can we solve it, right? So top layer elements lose their positioning context. Yeah, that's the problem. So how do we solve it? Well, there's two ways to solve it. The first way is you run some JavaScript, you compute an XY coordinate, and you tell the element, go to this XY coordinate. So you could use floating UI for this, right? So you get this function from floating UI, you find your popover, and you run something like this, right? So you're just assigning to the style, here's your top and left coordinates. And this will work. He's got a code pen here. Code pen, did it run? Yeah. So this will work. And this is nice. But option 2, anchor positioning. So this is a new CSS specification, which is under development. And it's another cool interface. So there's this Chrome for Developers post about it. Jahay is one of the spec authors. And the idea is that in its very like simplest form, what if you could bind two elements to each other, conceptually similar to how we can bind a relative ancestor with an absolute descendant, but anywhere on the DOM. Right? So we sort of declaratively say element A is the anchor for element B, even if it isn't an ancestor, if element A is not an ancestor of B. And two, even if element B is in the top layer, right? So it's going to give us these controls. And then it also brings all these other cool CSS goodies. So blog post sort of talks about the problems and then starts, right? So it's like, yeah, you can do it, track it with JavaScript, set things yourself. But now you take control for these different kinds of things. How do you deal with part of it not being inside of the viewport, this, that, and the other? So what about using anchor positioning? So he sort of details the core aspects of this new CSS feature. So it behaves similarly to what we have seen with view transitions in that you mark an element as participating in this feature by declaring a anchor name CSS attribute as opposed to view transition name. View transition name takes like a regular ident value. This takes a dashed ident value, similar to CSS properties. So this says, I am an anchor, and this is my unique anchor name. Okay. Once you do that, on some other element, you can use the anchor attribute, and you also get this anchor function, which you can use in CSS. He talks about like what's there. So you pass it the anchor element, the side of the anchor, and you can pass a fallback. So it helps you to position the element relative to the anchor how you want. He gets into all kinds of details. I played around with him. He's got this. Here you go. It's just going to load. This CodePen demo. Was this CodePen the one? Yeah, this one wasn't working. That's right. I think, is this a Twitter link? Yeah. So Jay has this other CodePen. Let's go back to the blog post here. Yeah, this one worked. So here he's demoing nested menus. So I just started exploring some of this. And one of the nice things, so like this is available now in Chrome behind the, whatever it's called, like web platform features, advanced web platform features or something. But it's only in Chrome. But there is a polyfill here. And pretty straightforward to use. I figure we can use this, but this is the reason, this and like view transition and all this stuff, this is the reason I'm doing all of this stuff in Chrome in the first place. So I was like, let's jump into using this. Let's put our emoji picker inside of a popover, and let's use the popover API to drive disclosure. And let's use the anchoring API to drive positioning. And that's what I was playing around with for the last hour and a half. So let me just like walk through what I did. So the first thing I did was just install our emoji picker package. Install emoji picker element package. And I copied and pasted the stimulus controller I had in my other project. So this is where we import the JavaScript, sort of initialize it. That's really all you need to do to initialize it. Honestly, I don't even think I need these methods now that we have the popover API. We're using the popover. I don't even think I use these. Let's just delete them. We will find out soon enough if we need them. So what I do, this is like the key thing. There is this event that is emitted from the custom element whenever you select an emoji. Right? This is in their README. Not like my favorite event name, because you could select that emoji by tapping on a mobile screen or tabbing and pressing enter. But whatever. This is the event, is the key point. And I don't need this anymore either. This old project was not using the new popover API. So we check, like, does our stimulus controller have an input target so you can bind the emoji picker to a form input element? And if it does, we take the Unicode string and we make that the value of our input element. And then we close the popover. But this isn't going to do anything for our popover. But pretty simple. So let's just commit this. Wrap the emoji picker and a stimulus controller. And we don't need the stimulus controller to like turn it on. That is, they like to render it. You just render it. But we will use it to connect that with like a form that we will submit to actually update the avatar. So then how do I wire it up? Well, I took this. We might actually be able to sort of recreate it. So let's pull up what we had before. So what we had before was an LI that had no classes, and we had a link, and inside of it, we just showed the little Unicode square and the list title. So first things first, don't need this anymore. This is the similar problem that we had up here, which is that like we want everything to be clickable link except for these buttons. And in order to do that, we need to use this block link pattern that we explored last time. Let's come up here and see how we're doing that. So instead of making this a anchor tag, we make it a regular tag that is position relative. Somewhere inside of its descendants, we will put a link. We'll make that link more semantically appropriate. So we're just going to make that browse all text our link. Makes sense. And then we activate the after pseudo element, sorry. And we say that after pseudo element is going to be absolutely positioned in set 0 block display. And what that's going to do is it's just going to make this clickable, contentless rectangle that takes up the full width and height of our relative ancestor. So now the whole thing becomes clickable, but we don't have the semantic issues in our HTML. And we also make it now easy to pull some interactive elements on top. I just throw a Z10 here, and they sit on top. So in ours, what we have here, this is all clickable, right? But these take priority if we're hovering over them. So anyway, we have the same problem in that we now need to make this clickable. So making this whole thing a list is going to be problematic and annoying. So the first change is let's move all of these classes for the styling up to the LI, and we'll make it relative. And let's move the link just onto our title text. Okay, so that's change one. We go from this to this and this. All right. Now we need to make this clickable. So how do we do that? Well, we know that we want to use the popover API like this. I don't like these styles. So what do? All right, I've got my button. It's got a popover target, and I've got a div, and it's got a popover attribute. There are different types of popovers, by the way. I don't even know if this is important. This is just me copying. Oh, here he does auto. I don't know where I copied this from. I don't think it matters. Anyway, we've got our button and we've got our popover. And inside of our popover, we put our emoji picker. Okay. So now we need to bind our invoker with our popover. And remember, we're using IDs here, so we have to make sure that they are distinct. So I use the DOM ID helper such that every list in our list has a distinct name, has a distinct ID. Then I need to turn on anchoring. So in order to turn on anchoring, I follow the pattern that I observed in, I think, this code pen, maybe another code pen. Okay, yeah, not this one. This one is all sort of manual. Trying to see where I got this from. Come on. It is, okay, well, I'm not sure. I don't recall. But anyway, whatever, let's just talk about the pattern. So the idea is to not be so reliant on getting the anchor names correct and binding things together in our CSS. I like that sort of tailwind philosophy of driving these sort of necessary connections up into my HTML so that when I'm looking at the HTML, I can see very clearly, oh, these two things are connected, right? So in this case, there is an HTML interface to the popover API to define this. For the anchoring API, at least as it is defined and implemented now, there isn't. It's all pure CSS. So how can we drive this up into HTML? Well, we can use CSS properties. So what do we do? Let me actually format this a little bit differently here. Make it a bit easier to see the distinct things that we are doing. So popover target is binding to ID, but we similarly need to bind the anchoring API together. So to do that, I define an anchor name CSS property on the invoker and an anchor CSS property on the popover. And I make sure that they're all the same. It might actually make some sense. Okay, we no longer need this. Let's extract this into a variable so that it's super explicit. Emoji popover DOM ID. That this is 100% going to be the same value in these 4 uses. So I just use the same value so that I have distinctive names. And then I'm going to use the CSS properties in the CSS to actually turn things on. So let's go and see what we do. So we want to merge together the popover API and the anchoring API. So I say for elements that have the popover target attribute, that is to say popover invokers, I want to make them anchors with a distinctive name, and that name is just going to be whatever their CSS variable for the anchor name is. All right. So now this has activated our popover invokers as anchors, and they have a distinct name, a unique name that will allow us to connect our popovers to these anchors. So how do we connect them? We say something that has the popover attributes. This is the actual popover content. We define this anchor default property, and we use the anchor CSS property. And because we are using the same DOM ID, our popover is going to get connected to our popover target. Then I am using, must have been from a simpler demo up here, because there's this fallback. I remember it was a scrolling demo with text. Where is this demo? I remember now the demo I used, and we can find it's this one. Consider this demo that has a scrolling container with anchors that have tooltips. The tooltip elements that are popovers might not be co-located with the anchors. What does he mean by that? So we got an anchor tag, the actual popover content way down here, footer, right? There's no relationship in the DOM between these. This is the demo where I saw this pattern, right? And so we have this behavior here to keep the popover content. Well, in this case, this isn't popover content, but to keep the anchored content in the scroll view. And in order to achieve that, and you can read more about this, but you have this idea of a position fallback, and you can define your own. Read more about it in this blog post. But I just took this one, which basically says, like, first try to position it with the bottom of the anchored content set to the anchor's top, which is this mode. The bottom of the anchored content is set to the anchor top, thus like this. But the way that this API works, if this gets occluded by the viewport, then this fails, and you will try your second one. And this, keeps it positioned to the left, but says position the anchored content's top on the anchor's bottom, i.e. like this, right? So I copied that. It's simple, basic, but nice. Copied that. And I set that as our position fallback. So now we have anchored our popovers to our popover invokers, and we have defined this view position fallback to sort of deal with scrolling in this sort of rudimentary way. There's this selector, and I'm just going to confess, right? Copied and pasted from right here. I have no idea what it is doing. Comment I didn't see. Let's see. The only thing that looks so weird with the newish HTML APIs is that the HTML attributes have no dashes but are super long. Same with the invoker APIs. Yes, this is true. It does look weird. I saw some discussions on GitHub, and the people who have power prefer it this way. I will say, though, that for me, I am willing to trade what I deem to be pretty for actual working new HTML features. So I'll take the ugly. If it works, and it actually works in HTML, I will take it. So this selector, I'm not sure like why. Oh yeah, it's for this. It's for this. So he talks about like what is anchor scroll. So if we turn it off, doesn't do anything. I'm going to remove it for now, since I don't know what it does, and I try not to keep code in my projects that I don't know what they do. Then the final thing is to tell the popover. This is copied from various places. I don't need it duplicated. To get the popover in a shape where it will respond to the anchor positioning. We definitely don't need all of this, but let's see what we do need. So let's come back here. Get this all there. This is kind of long. Let's just say, let's toggle. Right. Okay. And I just put this hideous hover effect on it for now. So by default, we have the same problem, right? It's way over here. It's not over here. That's what these styles are about. So let's work them in one by one. I don't think this is going to get us what we want right off the bat, but it is helping, right? So inset, this is like absolute and relative positioning. We say this is another one. I can confess, I don't totally understand what it's doing right now. We set it to position absolute. We want to pull it out of its default of, again, I think it's fixed. Or actually, let's go and look. We should just be able to go see. Popover. Computed. Yeah, fixed. So we want to make it position absolute. we don't want to make it relative to the viewport. Where does that get us? Same kind of place, okay? Then, I wish there was like an easier way for me to comment these without manually commenting every line. But maybe that's what I should do, because then I can uncomment the lines much more easily. Yeah, I don't have to select them. I realize that at the end. These are redundant. And I like to put inset after absolute. Let's remove our margin. Okay, so margin 0, like let's just look at what is happening here. By default, the popovers have margin auto. That's how they get their default style sheet from the browser is position fixed with margin auto, and so they put it right in the middle of the viewport. We want to drop that. And now they are positioned. Is this border on here? Yeah, where's that coming from? Oh, border 0px. Is this on the emoji picker? I don't think so. Let me just do a quick. Yeah, that's not doing anything. Yeah, I don't see a huge border on this. What? Pull this back. Just trying to. Your mind, get a sense, not remind, I have no idea where it's coming from. Just try to get a sense of why we got this big ass white border. Definitely don't need this stuff. I'm just going to get rid of all that stuff. So, big white border aside, where are you coming from? Whatever. I remember on the other project I just put the container rounded overflow hidden, just kind of make it like that. Like please. It must be a box shadow. We had, let's bring these back. Or an outline. Yeah, you can see it there. Must be default styles on a popover. Let's come down here, look at these default styles. You've got something on you. See here, outline. None. All of a sudden it's all dark. Now it's messing with me a little bit. What if okay. Just be normal. Okay. So outline none. Box shadow none. What? Oh, come on. What are you? Guesses in the chat. Is this like some? Is there some? There's some padding with a background color. Let's see here. Background red. Okay, there's some padding. There is default padding on the popover and a default background color. Okay, let's set padding to 0 for a popover. Okay. That looks better. We found it eventually. So, obviously, this is working. I turned the flag on in Chrome. Where is... here it is. The polyfill we should go ahead and add though. And we'll also see if we can test this in Safari. Let me create a new window here. What is our localhost number? 311. Oh, yes. Yeah, I wonder how that polyfill works. How does the CSS polyfill work? Yeah. Great question. I don't know. These are dark magics. I am like 2 versions behind on macOS, and therefore my Safari is also behind. Yeah, not quite. Yeah, our navigation event listener isn't there. That's Chrome only. But let's go to sources. So yeah, it came in, but it's not quite doing what we want. We will, let's fix that later. Anyway, so my point was just that, yes, there are some limitations and we need to polish this to make it like robust. But there are two really nice benefits to this approach. So the first I have been talking about, right, which is that we just avoid these z-index issues. The very first time I just turned on like I just took this, copied it, pasted it over here. It was just let me just show you what happened. Actually, that'll be just as easy. Let's come over here. Let's grab a details element. So I'll just leave this stuff for now. We need to put a Z10 on it, not Z0. Let's put it on the other side. Really force the issue here. So I'm seeing these problems, right? So immediately there's two problems. One, this guy's hanging out here. And two, this is cut off. Why is this cut off? It's cut off because we have this as a scroll container, right? So up here we have let's find overflow Y. And browsers are a little bit annoying whenever you make something a scroll container. Even though I'm just setting the y-axis, the x-axis is going to hide things. You can try to set overflow x. It just doesn't quite work. So it solves these problems immediately, right? It's not getting clipped by a scroll container. We are not fighting with z-index issues. It just will render on top. Big benefit number one. Big benefit number two, details and summary elements, by default, have no relationship to each other. So you could have 10 of them open, and they'll stack however they stack, which is not the user experience that we want, right? That's not the... Let me actually open this one. Not the user experience that we have. Whoops, it's kind of, I mean, you'll see though, right? Like this one's lower. So if it was still there, we'd see the bottom of it, right? It disappears. Popovers, there's one top layer. It's z-index infinity. There's not 10 layers, and only one element can be in the top layer at a time. So there is natural exclusivity. So to toggle one on is to toggle all of the others off. So we get this behavior that we want as well, right? Exclusivity. One is open at a time. At max, one is open at a time. So it just solves these problems. In a way that is pretty elegant, in my opinion. And I'm going to take some time. I'll figure out more about the polyfill and like what it supports. Is probably, these things happen when you are dealing with work in progress specifications that have polyfills. Like you have to make sure you are writing code to the subset of features that the browsers that do have functionality and the polyfill all support. And probably right now, I am not. So we'll dig into that. But I really like these two tools, and I really like them in combination. And I like this implementation pattern. It would be cool. Actually, right? Didn't we have an anchor attribute over on that other demo? Let's try that. Now it's behaving like Safari. Yeah. We need to keep that. So not the prettiest thing, right? That's prettier. Anchor name here would be prettier. But for the problem that we have, the fact that we can solve it with just HTML and CSS, I think is really exciting. I'm really happy to see these kinds of features coming to browsers. It's really exciting too to see like the interop initiative and the various browser vendors really being more conscientious and committed to ensuring that core functionality is being shipped across all of the browsers, and we have a really well established large set of functionality that works across all of the browsers. Like, these are all really cool things. So that is feature number one. Like, let's implement a anchored popover for our emoji picker. Let me do some committing here. Oh, let me amend this commit like so. Implement a basic anchored popover for the emoji picker. So now let's make it like actually show an emoji, right? Sort of do this little hover effect and the like. So let's get to work on that. I'm going to grab these classes. Okay, I'm going to start off here with an input. Oops, double strings. And I'm going to make you a emoji picker controller. I'm going to make this the input target. And we need to apply some classes here. So let's appearance none, border 0, and width, let's say 1ch. And let's set a default value. Let's pull back our square. Oh, right. Border 0 and BG transparent. Okay, one character too small. That's a bit too big, but that's okay. Oh, and let's also set pointer events to none. We don't want to interact with it. Hey, I mean, that's not bad. That's not bad at all. Not quite centered, sized up right, but I'm actually mildly impressed that that worked reasonably well on my first attempt. I'm not gonna lie. Things never go that well on my first attempt. Um, okay, let's bring back the border so we can see this input a little bit. Oh, let's add a border so we can see this. Can we throw a text align center on this and have that behave? Hey, we can. All right, that's all we need. Lovely. Not bad. So the last thing that we want to do visually, and then we need to wire this up to our backend, is we want to close the popover after we select something. So let's come back here, and we've got this hide popover JavaScript method. So in our controller, where previously I was working with detail summary, our element is up here. We want this. So let's add another target. Data, emoji, picker, target, popover. And we will say hide popover. You guys, these things are working on our first attempts. This is magical. This is magical. So one last thing, the interaction, the text is a bit bigger, circle is a bit smaller, and you don't see any background color until you hover, right? So we need to change our styles up here just a little bit. So let's just get rid of a default background color. We're not going to do anything to the text color on hover. I think we can darken that up a little bit. Wow. No, we can't. And then do I have a flex here with a gap? Yeah, let's shrink that gap down a little bit. I put a face. That's a bit too big. Let's drop that down. Let's look at the size. I think we can make this a bit bigger. Let's do font size. Oof. That's a bit too big. No, not that here. Font size, what do we have? Yeah, all right. Text LG 1.125. Let's give that a try. Yeah. That feels that feels okay. So let's commit this and then let's wire this up to our backend and actually set these avatars in our database. Wire up the emoji picker with an input in the invoker that will eventually be connected to a form. And now let's connect it to a form. So what is the behavior that we want to happen? We want to, so we have this behavior. When we click or interact with the invoker, we show the popover. When we, why is it not, it's supposed to be able to tab down into this. Okay. We will debug all those things once we have all the core stuff built. When we select a emoji, we update the input, we close the popover, and then we auto submit the form. So we've got 2 out of 3. We got to add the third. So step 1 is to put a form in here. So let's take our list form and bring it over. Yeah, I was thinking, should I put the form inside the button? And then I was like, I think, I'm not sure the semantics there. So let's put the button inside the form. And then outside of that button, we're going to use our old pattern, screen reader only submit button for our form. And then, if you recall, no, not you. I don't need to clear it. We have this stimulus controller. Oh, that's not the one I want. Okay. Autosave is the name. And just to show you where we have used it, we set up a form as autosave. And then what I'm confused. I didn't see. The data action. Yeah. Okay, so I have copied and pasted some code around. I must have these instances up here. So this is like our task view. This is our details view. And yeah, we are not we're not auto saving. Okay. I'm not losing my mind. I just have some bad code. So we want that, and we want this. Let's put this in double quotes. So we're just going to use the default event for an input element. Totally fine. I think we'll see. So we say when this input element changes, then invoke the autosave controller's save method. And that will submit this form. So if we come to our backend, let me clear this out again, and we make the puddle. Yeah, let's be explicit here. I don't remember what the default event is. Where? Let's try this again. In this, are we... This should trigger an event. What? Okay, so we do have our form. It's got all the stuff that we want. Input. Let's come here. Let's see if this is just even getting invoked. It isn't. So let's do a check. Google check. So JS. Setting input value not emitting change event. Okay. I figured it must be something like this. I don't want this jQuery stuff. Let's not this one. No, not turbo, stimulus. Let's look at the stimulus reference really quickly just to double check what the default event is for an input. It is the input event. Okay, let's be more precise. Manually emit input event. Yeah. let's give this a try. Let's come back here, remove that. Save and vote. So you saw it, and the page reloaded. So good, but it didn't update. I mean, it makes sense that it didn't update correctly because we are sending it some text. Action scroll. Oh, yes. I forgot. I'm still using my manually created input. Let's use a form helper here. Form dot text input. And this is for the avatar attribute. Side note, only 2 more days. Avatar The Last Airbender live action comes to Netflix. Fingers crossed that it doesn't suck or that it isn't just uninspired. I'm not super confident, but I'm going to give it a chance. I'm going to give it a chance. I'm ready for my heart to be broken. But who knows? Maybe. It's always a bit stressful when, like the original creators are involved and then they leave for creative differences. That never instills confidence. But, maybe it's good. We can cling to our maybe. Text input. See, this is the kind of first attempt that I am used to. And let's pull this up. Mismatched digest. So let's now change our database structure because we don't need this to be an active storage attachment. It can just be a text field, and we can just shove Unicode text into it. So let's generate a migration, add avatar to lists. And we're going to say avatar string. And let's commit this. I once did a small research excursion into what is the max number of bytes that you would need for a single Unicode character such that you could constrain a column. But I don't remember what it is, and I don't care right now. So we're moving fast. But it's somewhere back in my Twitter history. I had conversations with folks. I was chatting with Aaron Francis and Shavala, and we found a number. It was kind of tricky to get the number, but we did get to a number. So it's out there, and you could do that. And that that would make some sense. It'd make more sense maybe in like MySQL or Postgres where um, they are they sort of take the strict definition of your schema more forcefully than SQLite does. But for this, I don't really feel like we need it. And let's just run this commit. And then let's just update our model. So it doesn't have one attached. And so our controller, okay, our controller can stay the same. Nice. Yeah, let's just see if that is sufficient. So we're not wiring up Avatar now as a active storage attachment. We just have a database string field. Update lists. Right, but we're not using that. We're hard coding this. So let's get rid of that. Nice. So we're getting this exception from the IndexedDB database that the emoji picker is using, something about how TurboDrive is driving it. But it still opens after, so I'm okay to ignore that. So if we close this, let's now observe the interaction. So this sort of flashes. So not like 100% seamless. If you pull the mouse out of here, you don't notice it. But I don't know, not bad. And again, the point here is like really just to sprint on these implementations and to just start exploring like how we can get to 80% done, 80% good. And my hope is that this exercise can demonstrate like two things. One, for a lot of features, 80% good is good enough, right? Like if you're trying to build something to make money, if you're starting a side project, you want it to become like an actual moneymaker for you, it's really important to focus your energy, your time, your effort into the highest leverage activities. And there are like, I really do genuinely get it. I'm a perfectionist, especially when it comes to code. I want perfect code. I always want perfect code. But it is important to be pragmatic as well and to recognize that oftentimes the amount of time and effort that it would take to make every single interaction in every single browser at every single viewport just perfect is a nonsensical amount of time. And the harsh reality is that many users are not going to appreciate the time that you spent and the details that are there. And it is an art more than a science. It is experimental and iterative to figure out like what are the areas of your application where you should be okay with 80% done. It's an art and not a science to find high leverage solutions, right? To figure out, well, here's where I can put in 20% of the effort and get 80% of the value. It takes practice and training to learn your tools well enough that you can do that 20% of effort quickly. But when you put those things together and you start to practice that habit of shooting for 80% done as quickly as possible with the tools that you are approaching mastery with, you really give yourself a leg up in trying to do something of interest and value on the internet, right? Where there's billions of people that you are competing with. So I just want to state, I'm fully aware that this is not perfect. This does not have the polish and the sheen of Superlist, but I'm just one guy who didn't know anything about how precisely to do popovers and anchor positioning and view transitions and how turbo morphing works. I've barely even used turbo frames, right? And I'm working on this app outside of work, streaming a couple hours a night, and we're 80%, right? It's doing something, right? So I hope that you are taking away those lessons, that you will practice this kind of mindset and approach to building software when you're building it, because I have found it to be incredibly valuable, right? Just sprint to 80%, always dead sprint to 80% done, and then take a step back and assess, is this good enough? Am I using the right tools? Are they simple, well-tuned to the problem? Do I understand everything that's happening in this code base? If there are small parts that I don't, let me take the time now to comment stuff out and see what's going on here. These things really, really pay off in the long run. Okay, let's commit a couple things. There you go. Let's get these commits pushed up. And just like that, we are done with our avatars for lists. And we have got anchored popovers driving the interaction. I think that's pretty cool. How long have we been going for here? An hour and a half. Nice. Let me close some of these tabs. I don't need all of them. I want to keep this around. So what next? What were we doing with lists? Yeah, we want to, my nose itches, sorry. We want to connect a task with a list. Now, here's where I'm going to immediately deviate from the Superlist UI and UX. How do you associate a task with a list? The way that you do it is you grab the drag handle and you drag it over a list. Once you've done that, this shows up. It's a link to the list. Oh, goodness, this is new. Ignore that. I just don't like that interaction. Like, it's not even about not wanting to do drag and drop stuff. I just don't love the interaction. It is, there's no really strong visual signal to the user that that's what you need to do. This approach to labels, quite straightforward. So I just want to like replicate this. But that does remind me, we need to be able to create labels. That's a thing too. So many tiny little details. But I'm going to stay on lists. We're building lists. So let's make lists work. Let's generate another migration. And we will say add list ID to tasks. We're going to say list belongs to. All right, I pulled down a dependabot update to Rails. So I need to let that run. For some reason, that is slow. I guess it's slow because I'm streaming. While we do that, let me talk out loud around this problem. How do we support creating a label? So let's get some context. How does the interaction work in Superlist? So let's pay attention to the details. You open a popover and the search or create label input is automatically focused. If you start typing, it will match any labels that, let's see, start with yes, contains yes. Okay, so any label that contains the search text, and then it will also append to the bottom of the list a label with the matching text. So I am trying to think if there's any sort of way to lean on the server for this. And I don't think there is, right? I think we're going to need a stimulus controller. Now, let me tell you a principle of mine as I'm thinking through this, right? One principle that I have is I don't like going back to the server to fetch a bunch of small bits of UI. This is a pattern, honestly, I see 37 signals do more often than I would do, right? So if you've used the Hey email client and you open the menu, that is a lazily loaded turbo frame. So when you open the menu, the browser makes an AJAX request back to the server saying, I need the menu contents, please. The server renders that HTML, sends it back, browser gets it, injects it into that frame. I just don't love adding that latency. And so as a default, that's not to say that it doesn't make sense for certain occasions. It absolutely does in certain occasions. But my default is that I want to follow two principles. Principle one, I want the server to generate all of my HTML. Principle two, I want to absolutely minimize all AJAX calls to generate my screen. So how do those two things work themselves out? Well, if you take, for example, a nested form, I wish I could like really quickly scaffold this up, but I can't do it quickly. So I'm just going to talk it through. The pattern that I follow is to render a template tag on the page as a part of the server generating the overall page. And then I wire up a stimulus controller, which will hydrate that template tag. So instead of running, document.create element div, blah, 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 I generate the HTML structure that I need for some particular element. So like in this case where, imagine, well, actually, let's imagine this UI. You want to create multiple tasks. Task one, enter. You have the same sort of input. Task two, enter, right? So this sort of interaction. At a high level, when you are thinking about like conceptually, how could you build this kind of interaction? To my mind, there are basically three basic approaches. That was redundant, but approach one, this is the SPA approach, right? On the client, in JavaScript, execute some JavaScript, however many layers of indirection you have, that do, document.create element, drag handler, document.create element, button with popover, checkbox, input tag, popover. I could just create all the elements in using DOM APIs in JavaScript and then attach them to the DOM in the appropriate place, right? So you do everything client side and you are generating HTML through JavaScript. That's one approach. That's like the React style approach. React is a layer of abstraction around creating DOM elements with JavaScript. The other approach is have the server generate all that HTML. And when you need it, make an AJAX call and ask the server, please generate the HTML. So I type task 3 and I hit enter. That submits the form, right? I make a call back to the server with the form details. The server re-renders the page, and in re-rendering the page, it lists all of the tasks, and then it appends a new form below. and do update. Or option 3 is what I tend to reach for, right? Which is on initial page load, generate a template tag with all of this structure, right? A template tag, and it contains all of this. But all of the necessary details are omitted. Then when you need a new one, you, in JavaScript, so in our case, like in a stimulus controller, you go and grab that template tag that's sitting up here, you clone it, right? And then you hydrate all the details that are necessary, and you attach that to the DOM. So you're not running document.createElement. You're just taking a template, cloning it, and injecting it. Now, I have reached for that a lot in the past. One of the things that excites me about the new Turbo 8 features, morphing in this case in particular, is that it makes the user experience when you are choosing option 2, right? Just like, hey, just submit the form, re-render the page as if it were like Web 1.0 days, but have the user experience not feel like Web 1.0, right? Like keep your client-side state, keep the scroll position preserved, keep your focus preserved. And if you optimize your server, like to have those response times be speedy, it can feel as nice as this, right? But you're just like using pure Web 1.0 techniques, right? So I really like that. And I'm going to reach for it more. But in this case, that is a situation where I don't feel that it is appropriate to go back to the server and ask the server basically, hey, re-render this popover on every keystroke, you know? So that was a bit long-winded. All that to say, the way we need to solve this problem is to use a template tag and a stimulus controller. But let's get back to this. I'm sorry for that digression. I just realized I hadn't started to even think how I wanted to solve that problem, and I wanted to form a plan. All right, let's prepare our commit. Let's go and look at our, yep, looks good. All right, let's run our migration. Aha, yes, of course. We are going to have that problem. So here's the simplest way to solve that. See how easy that was? Whoops, down here. When you're in local development, I am not afraid to just wipe my database. So now we want to go to our task. I want to make sure to say it belongs to a list. I'm going to go to our list and make sure to say it has many tasks. Make that dependent destroy. Okay, so now we want to recreate the popover sort of dialogue that we have for labels, for lists, and I think I'm gonna stop after that. Let's see how far we can get. Okay. So let's look at our main list. Assignee, link to. Okay, so this is like our calendar. These are our tags. And this is our do nothing list. All right. Let's start by replacing. I don't need all that. Let's just type a list. All right. Let's pull that out. Then we need to find, we made labels real over here. Oh, we also need to bring that back. Oh, got another. I thought I got rid of all these icons, but I clearly did not. Okay, icon. 3 dots vertical and size 4. Okay. Oh, another one. Arrow bar right. Size 3. Copy. Counterclockwise. Right. What is this icon helper from? Yes. This is something I am pretty excited about. This is a newer pattern that I'm using. So I'm happy to talk more about it. So I am using the Bootstrap icon set. It's just one that I know and like. And honestly, I don't know if this has been here for forever and I just never really paid attention to it, or if it's on the newer side. But they provide a sprite sheet. That is to say, they have a SVG file that is set up to support this kind of use of SVGs. And this is one of the really cool features of SVGs, is that you can reference them, but you need to have a sort of source SVG sprite that defines things in such a way that they can be used. So I went and got that sprite sheet, which is a single SVG tag with a whole bunch of symbol definitions. Those symbol definitions have IDs on them, and then inside of the symbol, you define the paths. Right? So it's just a big file. I put that file in the public directory, and then I wrote this little helper. So the icon helper just generates an SVG tag with some Bootstrap class names. They're not even used for anything. This isn't exactly how Bootstrap does it. They only do one dash, whatever additional classes you provide. I set up a default width and height. That's just something I like. So, every now and again in development, my CSS, I have an error in it. It doesn't compile. I reload the page. I don't have any styles. And I've got like these massive SVGs, just annoying. Using a single icon set is nice because they all use the exact same view path. And then I just put a use tag in there with that xlink href, and I point it at that file and that particular ID. And so the browser will download that file, cache it, and what I put in the DOM is just these really tiny SVG tags that reference a single source of truth for the full definition of like all of the paths. So I don't have to duplicate like all of that text. And yeah, this is the first project where I am using this helper, but it's like, it works flawlessly and I really love it. I get a fair bit of these actual SVGs in there because I build these things in Tailwind Playgrounds or CodePen, and I can't use that. So I just copy the raw SVG from the Bootstrap website and bring them in. And then when I copy all of that HTML and bring it back into the project, I've got all of that. But I want to replace all of it with this. So that is what that helper is. And I'm definitely going to be using it on all future projects. Next question. What do you like about Zed? I'm seeing quite a few devs replace VS Code with that. So a couple of things. First, I am definitely one of those like developers. Let's say like I have an old soul. I mean, I'm not young, but I'm not too old. But when I first started off, like even before I got into tech, I was just in graduate school. I loved being at the cutting edge. I distinctly remember the Apple keynote. I was watching it live where they announced that they were opening up the Mac OS developer beta program to the public, and you could register to be a part of the public Mac OS beta program. So you could run the betas of upcoming Mac OS releases without having an Apple developer account. I was like, this is awesome. And I joined that program and I was running Mac OS betas. I don't know how long into like my career as a software engineer, but it wasn't that long, maybe 2 or 3 years. I completely switched. Like I am very much the guy who's like, I want other people to be at the cutting edge, and I will hang out at the very back where things are old and don't break. So like I'm running macOS Monterey 12.5.1. I think I'm 2 versions behind on macOS. Anyway, that just gives you a little bit of context about like my personality and my thinking. So I used Sublime Text for a very long time. And it was maybe 2 years ago or so that I started considering replacing Sublime Text with something for no other reason than I was just super tired of not having a built-in terminal into my text editor. So I would use iTerm for the terminal and Sublime Text for my editor. And I like to work with a bunch of desktops. And the way that Sublime Text worked, it would not repopulate the windows if you like restarted your computer back into those desktops like iTerm does, and it was nice. So I could never like create these pairs of like this iTerm window and this Sublime Text window. I want them to always be in this desktop. And so anytime like I had to reset my computer or my computer crashed or something, and just getting everything turned back on and then having to, tab between the windows, I just got to a point where I was like, I'm curious. I see that there are more editors that have a terminal emulator built in. So I switched to the Nova editor from Panic, and I used that for a couple years, and I liked a lot of things about it. Um, I chose it because I like native editors, right? I want my text editor to be like, I never want there to be latency ever, for anything. I want to open giant files. I want to have 10 different instances of my editor open, each of them with 10 tabs open, and run project searches across all of it. Like I never ever want latency, and native applications are much better at making that true. But for whatever reasons, I have no idea the reasons, like it would crash for me on average, like once every 5 days. And I could never isolate like what was causing the crashes. But I liked having a built-in terminal. It worked well enough. So I used it for 2 years. And then I saw Zed came out, and um, it had a built-in terminal. It had a focus on like speed. And, I was like, well, Nova does crash for me every week, so I'll give it a try. I gave it a try. It's never crashed, and it's fast. And honestly, it reminds me a lot of Sublime Text, but it has this built-in terminal. So um, I have that. I have never once used VS Code. There are two reasons for that. One, I just am ideologically opposed to a text editor written in JavaScript or TypeScript or whatever, something that is running JavaScript. Just it makes me sick to my stomach, and I don't want to support those ideas. And two, I don't like hate Microsoft, I guess, but it's like I'm not rushing headlong into the seemingly inevitable future of Microsoft owning all of the dev tools that like the entire development community uses. So it's like I use GitHub, right? When I started using GitHub, they weren't owned by Microsoft, but it's not like I've left. But yeah, Microsoft is trying to own everything. I don't love the idea of one company owning everything, and I just do not trust or believe that a text editor written in TypeScript with like Electron is ever going to be as low latency as something that's written in a lower level, more native way. And I really am maniacal about low latency in my text editor. Yeah, Marco says that feels a lot like Atom, which is more simple and more snappy than VS Code. Yeah, I never used Atom. I was on Sublime Text when Atom came out, and I was on Sublime Text when Atom died. I had some coworkers though who used Atom, and they tried to be like, "You should change editors because of built-in Git integration." I was like, "Yeah, I've got Git Tower. I'm fine." Um, yeah, I'm just not one to like jump around between things very much. So I have no plans on leaving Zed. It's also quite nice. Like Zed has a built-in AI integration, so you just plug in your OpenAI API key, and you have ChatGPT right here. It has Copilot integrated. Yeah, I've been really happy with it. And I have zero interest in ever trying out VS Code. VS Code can crawl under a rock for all I care. Yes, that's true. Zed, it is worth saying that like Zed is relatively new as a text editor. Um, they did just go open source, so maybe some more people would get involved, but it is not feature complete, right? It doesn't have the language server protocol support. It doesn't have like its syntax highlighting for like all of the different syntaxes is not perfect. So It is certainly not as feature complete as VS Code. It doesn't have as many plugins as VS Code, doesn't have as many themes, doesn't have as many features, but it doesn't have Emmet shortcuts, doesn't have any like shortcuts for working with ERB or anything. But in the end, like I just care about having a rock solid, right? So it doesn't crash, low latency, does 80% of the stuff I want a text editor to do, and does it like consistently and always. And it does that for me. So I am happy with it. I'm going to grab this and bring it over here. Oh, right. We got rid of all of our tasks. Task 1. What in the world? What is this doing? Set list. Allow tasks. Yeah. Oh, Nate, I'm sorry. I missed your comment. Any reason to not put it in app assets images and then use image path in the helper to avoid caching issues? The reason is that I don't expect to have caching issues. I'm not sure how often Bootstrap adds icons, but I think it's basically done. And I thought I was being cheeky just putting it in public. But that's probably a smarter idea. I should probably change it. Boycott Electron apps. Yeah. It's hard to boycott them. They are everywhere. They populate like rats. Electron apps are a lot like rats in many ways. All right. What is an unprocessable entity? Ah, yes. Of course. I screwed up. It has to be an optional belongs to. Whoopsie daisy. Not all tasks belong to lists, and they certainly don't belong to lists as soon as they pop into existence. So we drop that. We say null true. We run this migration again, models, and we set that up. Okay, much better. A task only optionally belongs to a list. No, just re-renders. All right, let's try this again. Task 1. Task 2. Okay. That's duplicated, but the whole point of what I just did was to copy this over. Did I like copy and paste it into the same file or something? Stupid. Okay, I'm in tasks made. Okay, let me go. Before we update our listing, let's get our labels thing brought over. Okay, let's try this again. We have deleted all of our labels. Are there any default labels? They don't have any default labels. The way that they're doing it, you don't lose the labels once you set them up. That's going to be a problem for us because we're not using a separate table. Yeah, Nate, you're exactly right. If a new icon is ever added, I'm screwed because I can't bust the cache. I should totally move them into app images. Yeah, 100%, 100%. But that's like one of the great benefits of just live streaming this stuff. Is you just have smart people tell you how to do things better. It's actually really awesome. I recommend it. It's just not a lot of time. I'm already running a bit long. Okay, let's take 15 minutes and let's try to replace this with our anchored popover approach. So let's go grab what we were doing. Over here. So let's put all this inside of a turbo frame. We're going to call this labels form. Our toggle have our same inputs and the same classes as our summary, and then our popover won't need the Z stuff, just needs this stuff. And that, and then we throw our form inside of it. Okay. Yep, of course. We don't have a list. We have a task. Okay. That's nice. A couple of commits here. Replace raw SVG icons with icon helper. Replace the static labels popover with a form enabled anchored popover. Let me just write this in GitHub. I'm going to need to make labels a separate table. As just a reminder, so we are currently using a quasi-array column on the task table to drive our labels. And then we are grabbing the unique set of labels across all of our tasks to generate this list. But what that means is if you deselect a label from a task and it is the last task that has that label disappears from the list of labels to choose. And I believe that this is all of the tasks. And you will see that there are no labels, but we still have these labels available to us. So this sort of interaction here has some permanence, and it seems like this is the one way that you have to manage your labels. So as of right now, for Superlist, I don't see a way to delete a label, but we're going to need to support that. Make labels a separate table. But what we're going to need to do for the time being is we're just going to need to jump into console and throw a label. Let me do like so. All right, my styles are not working quite right. What's up with that? Where do I define the text colors? Where do I define the text colors over here? Man, it must be just way up there getting inherited. Where am I? Defining color. Dark, text white. What is that defined on though? Who knows? Let's just put it here, though. Much better. With our changing this to a popover, we're going to have to change the solution to keep it open. What we were doing before is we would wrap it in a turbo frame, and then our details element would have the open attribute if we were rendering in response to a turbo frame request. Is there a similar attribute? This is the difference, by the way, between auto and manual popovers. Only one auto popover can be displayed at once. Multiple manual popovers can be displayed at once, but they can't be light dismissed. Okay. I don't see an HTML attribute to drive that. So I'll probably have to do a stimulus controller just to show you again, like what I mean. If we deselect this, ooh, this form is not, no, there's a scope to task. What? Label for tasks, labels, label 1. This is not. This is not scoped to our particular task. And so the other LI in has the same label, which means it has the same input with the same ID. Gonna have to solve that too. But I'm running out of time, so let's write these up as issues. Keep label anchored popover open after turbo frame request. We'll probably need a stimulus controller to mimic the behavior of details open. Then also ensure that the collection checkboxes inside of the label popover form have unique IDs. By default, boxes. All right, we're going to need to solve those problems. But let's tackle that tomorrow. So for tomorrow, we want to get labels all working. I want to solve those two problems. I want to get the ability to create labels set up. I want to move labels into a separate table and drive all of that. And once we have this interaction working the way that we want for labels, I want to copy it for lists and allow you to attach a task to a list through a similar dropdown. But I'm not going to allow you to create a list from this dropdown. So it's going to be similar, but a little bit different. Not checkboxes, but like radios and so forth and so on. So that'll be what we tackle tomorrow. Dom Christie has been working on some pull requests to improve view transitions. So I will try to work with him some tonight and tomorrow. And maybe we can get those merged in and look at what is happening there as well. And get labels working, make sure it's set up in both places. Then after that, we can messaging. I think I might just drop that. Yeah, but we are getting close. We need to get this working. This is our sorting / grouping action. Get our keyboard shortcut to work. Ooh, let me add that. Define keyboard shortcut for jumping to new task form. Get that working. I definitely want to get that working. Get like the basics of Duet. This stuff, remind me, repeat. We're going to drop that. But dynamically render a calendar, set the Duet, set the assignee. So I'll have users and stuff. Get the today view. I'll probably end up dropping messages from this. And then maybe we get around to sections to group lists, but maybe not. And then like some small tweaks, like stuff like this. It shouldn't open task one. You should be able to close it like that. Small tweaks like that. So that's what we've got coming up for the rest of the week. I think that's it. I'm going to stop now, and I will see everyone tomorrow. Thanks for hanging out, as always. And yeah, thanks for like the fun questions and the great suggestions. I really appreciate it. And it's cool to see this taking shape. So looking forward to see how far we can make it in the next 5 days. All right. I'm going to shut down now. I'm growing tired. Ciao, ciao.